It was the type of place people didn't speak about anymore. Not because they had forgotten it, but because they chose to forget. The old seminary stood on the edge of town, shrouded in an eerie silence that seemed to cling to its crumbling stone walls. The iron gates had long since rusted shut, barring entry to those brave or foolish enough to approach. For decades, it had sat abandoned, a looming relic of a past that no one wanted to revisit. But at night, when the wind howled through the towering oak trees surrounding the grounds, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered in the broken windows, shadows moved in the corridors, and a low, mournful sound could be heard echoing through the halls. The locals called it the weeping. They said it was the sound of the seminary's forgotten past, the lost souls who had never left. The rumors had persisted for years. The seminary was haunted, they said. Once a place of learning and spiritual reflection, it had become a magnet for tragedy, and something darker now lingered within its walls. But like most ghost stories, the legend of the old seminary had faded into local folklore. No one had truly believed it until now. As I stood before the gates, staring up at the towering facade, I felt an unmistakable chill crawl down my spine. I had heard the stories, the whispers about the strange occurrences inside the seminary. But I had come to see for myself. Armed with only a flashlight and a recorder, I was determined to spend the night within the haunted halls of the old seminary. The truth, whatever it was, lay just beyond those gates. And I was about to uncover it.
Welcome, dear listeners, to another chilling episode of Wicked Whispers, where the shadows come alive and nightmares whisper their secrets.
The old seminary had once been a prestigious institution, established in the early 1800s as a place for young men to pursue religious studies. Built on a sprawling estate, the seminary's impressive stone architecture and serene gardens made it a perfect place for quiet reflection and academic pursuits. For decades, it thrived, producing scholars, priests, and theologians who went on to make significant contributions to the church. But beneath its surface of piety and discipline, the seminary was haunted by darker undertones. Students whispered of strange occurrences, doors that would slam shut on their own, footsteps echoing through empty halls, and the unnerving feeling of being watched. Some attributed these experiences to overactive imaginations or stress from their rigorous studies, but others believed that something more sinister was at play. It wasn't long before the tragedies began. In the mid-19th century, a young seminarian was found dead in his room under mysterious circumstances. His body was discovered hanging from the rafters, his face twisted in terror. Some said he had been driven to madness by the intense academic pressure, while others believed he had been tormented by something unseen. The incident was quickly hushed up, but the seminary's reputation never fully recovered. Over the following decades, more strange deaths occurred, students disappearing without a trace, others found dead in similarly unnatural ways. The seminary continued to operate, but its enrollment numbers dwindled, and eventually, it was forced to close its doors in the early 20th century. The building was left abandoned, its once pristine halls now filled with dust and decay. But the stories didn't stop. Locals began reporting strange sightings around the seminary grounds. Figures dressed in clerical robes, ghostly lights flickering in the windows, and the sound of faint chanting always at night, always when the mist rolled in from the surrounding hills. The seminary's dark legacy had become more than just legend. Perhaps the most disturbing phenomenon associated with the old seminary is the weeping. This ghostly sound, which can be heard most clearly on quiet, windless nights, has been reported by numerous witnesses over the years. Described as the soft, mournful cries of a woman, the weeping echoes through the seminary's deserted halls, seemingly coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. The origin of the weeping is a matter of speculation. Some believe it is the ghost of a young woman who met a tragic fate at the seminary, though there is no record of any female students or staff at the institution during its operational years. Others claim that the weeping is the expression of the collective sorrow of those who died under mysterious or violent circumstances within the seminary's walls. One of the most chilling accounts of the weeping comes from a local historian who visited the seminary in the 1970s. Armed with a tape recorder and a deep skepticism of the supernatural, the historian set out to document the site's history and debunk the ghost stories once and for all. What he captured instead was a recording of the weeping, faint but unmistakable. The sound sent shivers down his spine and has since become one of the most compelling pieces of evidence supporting the haunting of the old seminary. Among the most enduring and terrifying legends surrounding the old seminary are the disappearances. During the seminary's later years, several students reportedly vanished without a trace. Their belongings were found neatly arranged in their dormitories, but the students themselves were never seen again. Despite extensive searches and investigations, no clues were ever uncovered as to what happened to them. Some speculate that the students were victims of foul play, though there is no evidence to support this theory. Others believe they were lured away by something otherworldly, drawn into the darkened corners of the seminary where they were never able to escape. The lack of explanation has fueled a belief that their spirits continue to wander the halls, searching for a way out. The most famous of these disappearances is that of Samuel Wainwright, a young seminarian who vanished in 1897. Samuel was known to be an exemplary student, devout, hardworking, and well-liked by his peers. On the night of his disappearance, Samuel had been studying alone in the library when he was last seen by one of his classmates. The next morning, his books were found open on the table, his chair pushed back as though he had stood up abruptly. But Samuel was gone. For weeks, search parties combed the surrounding area, but no trace of Samuel was ever found. His disappearance became the subject of speculation, with some suggesting he had run away or been the victim of foul play. But those who knew him best believed otherwise. They claimed Samuel had been troubled in the weeks leading up to his disappearance, speaking of strange dreams and hearing voices in the night. He had confided in a close friend that he felt something was watching him, though he couldn't explain what it was. After Samuel's disappearance, the seminary's enrollment continued to decline, and it wasn't long before the institution closed its doors for good. But even after the seminary was abandoned, Samuel's presence was still felt. Visitors to the library reported seeing a shadowy figure moving among the stacks, and some even claimed to have heard the faint rustling of pages when no one else was around. One of the most frequently reported sightings at the Old Seminary is that of a shadowy figure that roams the halls at night. Described as a tall, dark silhouette with no discernible features, the figure is often seen gliding silently through the corridors or standing motionless in doorways. Witnesses have reported an overwhelming sense of dread in the presence of the figure, as though it radiates a malevolent energy. The shadowy figure is believed by some to be the spirit of a former seminarian who met a tragic end within the building's walls. Others suggest it could be something far older and darker, a manifestation of the evil that lurks within the seminary's stone walls. Whatever it is, the figure has been a source of fear and fascination for those brave enough to visit the site. In 2010, a group of paranormal investigators spent the night at the seminary in an attempt to capture evidence of the haunting. Using thermal cameras, motion sensors, and audio recorders, they set up equipment throughout the building. As the night wore on, the team experienced several strange occurrences: cold spots, flickering lights, and disembodied voices. But the most unsettling moment came when one of the investigators spotted the shadowy figure at the end of a long hallway. The figure stood perfectly still, watching the investigator for several moments before disappearing into thin air. The encounter was captured on video, and though the footage is grainy and difficult to make out, the terror in the investigator's voice is unmistakable. The incident remains one of the most compelling pieces of evidence of the haunting.